Welcome to the Arizona Revival History Channel. I'm Dale Gilmore. Okay, to be honest, I was a little shocked at this headline, Prostitution Paid for St. Paul's Church. The newspaper headline was from the Herald Review in Cochise County, Arizona, dated June 12, 2017. The newspaper story was about tours that had begun at St. Paul's Church, and the information of the unusual source of funds was part of the tour. Now, I want to be careful not to impose my sensibilities from the 20th and 21st century on these people who were making decisions back in the 1880s. It is very true that these early churches in Tombstone were dependent on a variety of sources for their income, especially their major projects like building their buildings. They had to go to those who had the money. And in Tombstone, it was probably the prostitutes, the silver mine owners, and the gamblers. In our next video, we are going to look more closely at Pastor Endicott Peabody from St. Paul's Episcopal Church. But as a prelude, hear the story of Wyatt Earp, a tarot card dealer, reacting to Pastor Endicott Peabody coming into the Oriental Saloon seeking donations.
Peabody had come from back east, and he spearheaded building the church. He was a young guy. He was a regular guy. Like other men of his time, he liked to box, where you stood there without doing the moving. You stood there and hit each other. Right. He started the town's baseball team. As long as you went to church, anywhere, you could be on it.
Okay.
And he became friends with Wyatt Earp.
Okay.
Earp ran a faro table in the back of the Oriental Saloon.
Mm-hmm.
Peabody would go in there and Earp would go, "Oh, here he comes. This pot's for God. Take all the money, give it to the Reverend." Earp and Peabody strangely became fast friends. They were each in town only for a year or two. And then Peabody went back to Massachusetts. Earp went to California. They stayed friends for the rest of their lives.
And now hear John Donahue tell about the fundraising from the prostitutes in Tombstone.
Now, what you've got here, this little wine shack, is our museum dedicated to working girls.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. That kind of shocked me when I saw that.
Every western town
you came on
had prostitution. The prostitutes, in an age without good birth control, had kids. They made a lot of money. They'd make $3 an hour when the men in the hills made $3 for 10 hours. So they were an economic factor. They had kids. They wanted a normal town. They donated to our public school. They donated to our church. And this was the same in all the other western mining towns too. So Sonny's made a little museum.
Okay. Now, interestingly, St. Paul's had purchased one of the prostitutes' line shacks nearly 100 years ago, in 1927 or 1928. It was a one-room dwelling called a crib with dimensions of about, say 15 feet by 20 feet. Here's some video outside and inside this crib. The church had used the space for meetings, such as Bible study, a schoolroom, and storage until recently. Sonny Quatcham and her husband decided they would make this little building into a museum to honor the so-called working girls who helped build the church, St. Paul's Church. John said that from data gleaned from diaries of that time, one of these cribs would cost a person $450 to purchase. The museum crib was now dedicated to a prostitute named Augustine Martinez, They have a picture of her on the wall, along with a copy of her license to be a prostitute in Tombstone. Now, unfortunately, there was a real cultural divide in Tombstone according to where people lived. John Donahue had said that Fremont Street was the dividing line. The good people lived north of Fremont Street. Everyone else lived south of Fremont. Now listen to John talking about a woman needing an escort walking south of Fremont Street.
Sunny lives on this side of Fremont. Forget Derek for a minute, but if she wanted to go to the other side, she would have had to find a man to go with her, or people would have assumed that she was a working girl.
It was that obvious. I mean, if a single woman was seen on that side of town.
And fair game. Now, Sonny's world then would have been the same as a woman today, going shopping, food, bringing in food, something she does in our time, making clothes.
Okay.
They didn't have clothes from China dirt cheap, did they?
No.
So
That's a whole nother story on fashion.
She would have been married to somebody with a pretty good job doing something. There were lawyers, accountants, business people of all sorts.
And here's a little aside for free. Sonny Quanchin talked about the dresses the typical Tombstone women wore.
Well, the whole Victorian way of dressing,
Yeah.
which is what we had here, Victorian, Edwardian, totally different.
Mm-hmm.
The average woman had two outfits. The skirt and blouse she had on every day in work. The dress she was married in was also her go to Sunday meeting, go to social. They usually had only two. Now the ladies that might be married to a doctor or a lawyer, they would have a few more. But we were never like Chicago or New York where they changed their clothes 7 times a day.
You're kidding.
A few of the
I do a whole thing on fashion. I won't go into it
That's
now.
amazing.
But it's just amazing.
Maybe a couple of the hookers were at that level
Oh, some of the ladies of the evening, and
They
so
had-
when they dressed, when they went out, it's a misconception that everybody wore, the low things. No, they did not. During the day, a Victorian lady, including our ladies of the evening, were up to here, as evidenced in Augustine's
no
picture.
outside course.
Although prostitution was legal and helped the economy of Tombstone in those days, I want to focus some significant time in this video on a woman who was a little more positive of an influence on the economy of Tombstone. Her name was Nellie Cashman. She earned the nickname the Angel of Tombstone for reasons which you will soon see. Her life was so full and varied, and I cannot possibly cover it all in this blog, but I want to give a little background to Nellie and focus on her time living in both Tucson and Tombstone. Nellie was not a prostitute, and she never married. Nellie was born in Queenstown, Ireland in 1850, and she emigrated to the United States with her mother and younger sister in the 1860s. They initially settled in Boston, Massachusetts in 1867. Nellie and her sister Franny both found work in hotels that dotted Boston's harbor. Nellie's hotel was one known to often host General Ulysses S. Grant. On one of his visits, he met Nellie and offered her advice about her future pursuits. Nellie said, "He was very easy to talk to," she reported to a newspaper reporter years later. "He was friendly like everyone I ever knew. When I told him I wanted to do things because I had to if I wanted to live, he said, 'Why don't you go west, young woman? The West needs people like you.'" She took his advice, and in late 1869, She, along with her sister and her mother, boarded the train and headed for San Francisco. This began a career for Nellie of being a prospector looking for gold and silver and being a businesswoman operating hotels and restaurants. She was talented and successful in almost everything she did from this point on in her life. She was extremely kind and a giving individual, helping people who were in need, especially her fellow miners. Plus, she was a very successful fundraiser. Now let's jump ahead 10 years to when she arrived in Tucson, Arizona. In 1879, the Southern Pacific Railroad had just laid tracks into Tucson, and now Tucson was rapidly becoming a vibrant and growing desert community. Nellie believed that a restaurant would be a logical and profitable business to start in the city, since she had already run one in Nevada. When she arrived that year, she immediately began to turn her idea into a reality. When she opened the doors of her restaurant, named the Delmonico Restaurant, she was the first single white businesswoman in the area. In an ad placed in the newspaper Arizona Citizen, Nellie promised patrons the best meals in the city. The popularity of her establishment was proof that her cooking lived up to her bold claims. Now, I've been on a search for where her restaurant might have been located in Tucson. John Clum, the editor of the Tombstone Epitaph newspaper, was a friend of Nellie's and became a biographer of hers as well. He casually mentioned in one of his articles the restaurant was located across from Church Square. Now, San Augustine Cathedral was just being built in those years, and there was a park-like opening near the church. I've taken some video as I drove around the Mammoth Catholic Cathedral today. Where that park-like square would have been, or how large it might have been, we do not know. This area has changed a lot since 1879, obviously, but there are still some old adobe houses along Cushing Street, south of the cathedral, which could have dated back into the 19th century. Now, it was said of Nellie that she gave away as many meals to miners and people who could not pay as she sold to people who could pay. And yet her business thrived. You can see some of these adobe buildings have been converted into modern office places, but they could have hosted the Delmonico Restaurant. Now, the interesting thing about Nellie was that she wanted badly to find either a silver claim or a gold claim that would bring her riches. So when she heard silver had been found in Tombstone, she sold the restaurant, and in 1880 she traveled the 70 miles down to Tombstone. Upon arriving, she opened up a boot and shoe store. One source said her store also sold groceries and ladies' fineries. I am not sure where that was in Tombstone. Location hasn't been determined. But soon she was cooking again. She began operating the Russ House in Tombstone. It was named after the original Russ House in San Francisco, and there was a boarding house as well as a restaurant. Nellie served 50-cent meals, advertising that, and I love this, "There are no cockroaches in my kitchen and the floor is clean." It seems that Nellie was demanding in terms of the expectations of those who worked for her. That was why her restaurant was successful. But also stories exist of how good she was to them, giving them time off as needed, helping them financially if they needed help. One legend about the restaurant that has come down to our day is that if a client complained about Nellie's cooking, and Doc Holliday was present in the restaurant and heard that, Doc would draw his sidearm pistol and hold it and would ask the customer to repeat what he had said. The embarrassed customer would reply, "Oh, it was the best meal I ever ate." During her years in Tombstone, Nellie gained a reputation as an angel of mercy. She became a prominent and influential citizen. Being Irish and a lifelong Catholic, Nellie convinced the owners of the Crystal Palace Saloon, one of whom was Wyatt Earp, to allow Sunday church services there until she had helped raise enough funds for construction of the Sacred Heart Catholic Church. In addition to the Catholic Church, Nellie Cashman also raised money for the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, the Miners' Hospital, and amateur theatricals that were staged in Shiflin Hall in Tombstone. She was famous for taking up collections to help those who had been injured and fallen on hard times, especially miners. And if a married miner died in the mines, she would immediately go down to Allen Street saloons with her hat upside down to collect money for the widow. Her advice to them was always to leave Tombstone and go to Tucson, where there were more opportunities to work, or go back home to their parents, rather than staying and becoming a prostitute in Tombstone. Yet Nellie was pragmatic regarding Tombstone's red light district. She was not shy about approaching the brothels in Tombstone for money, and found them to be sympathetic and charitable to her causes. And likewise, if any of the soiled doves, as the prostitutes were called, if any of them lacked food, clothing, or the means to return home, she would raise money for them as well. Interestingly, she also made regular visits to the local prison to visit with death row inmates. Usually the men awaiting execution were alone and fearful of the vengeful residents of the area. Now this fact leads to one of the more interesting stories in Nellie's time in Tombstone. In December of 1883, 5 men had committed a robbery in Bisbee, Arizona, a nearby city, leaving 4 people dead. This event has come to be known as the Bisbee Massacre. Law enforcement had quickly found the men, and they were brought to the Tombstone jail, which was the county seat. After their trial, all 5 were found guilty and were scheduled to be executed by hanging at the same time on March 8, 1884. Now, a mass hanging was unusual, and all of these events kind of became the talk of Tombstone, and the town soon took on a carnival-like atmosphere. The sheriff actually was issuing free tickets for people to watch the event inside the jail's courtyard, and when he ran out of tickets, a businessman agreed to build a set of bleachers high enough to see over the fence into the jail's backyard. They would be able to see the gallows and watch the hanging, and so he began selling tickets for that event too. Nellie objected adamantly to the circus that was surrounding this event. She was outraged at the citizens' behavior and feeling that no death should be celebrated. She soon befriended the 5 convicts, visiting them often and providing them with spiritual guidance. These people were also very concerned about having hundreds of people gawking at their hanging. Nellie began pleading with Sheriff Ward, was his name, to stop the circus that was developing in town. He said he would not stop what was happening. So, she asked him to place a curfew on the town the night before the hangings were to take place. He agreed to that, and so people had cleared the streets by 10 o'clock p.m. That night, about 2 o'clock a.m., Nellie and a crew of men arrived at the bleachers that had been erected around the jail's fence and began to dismantle them. The next day, the execution was to be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When people arrived, they saw that the bleachers had been made into kindling wood, and only those in the courtyard could witness the event. The convicts had also heard that there were plans to rob their dead bodies from their graves for a medical school study. Nellie Cashman assured the convicts that would not happen. So upon their burial up in Boot Hill, Nellie hired 2 prospectors to guard the graves for 10 consecutive days. Nothing happened, and the bodies remain in Boot Hill today in undisturbed graves. In another display of her courage and moxie, later that same year, a miners' strike had been called. Some of the men in the region were very angry at the mining superintendent, who would not negotiate with them, and were secretly planning on lynching him on a particular evening at midnight. Well, Nellie heard about it, and at 10 o'clock p.m. that night, a buggy and a team of horses arrived at Superintendent E.B. Gage's residence south of Tombstone. Mr. Gage got in the buggy, and after traveling slowly back through Tombstone and then out of town again, the driver of the buggy sped up the horses and drove the wagon and the team of horses hard up the 20-some miles to Benson, Arizona. There, Mr. Gage got on a train headed for Tucson and safety. Of course, the driver of that team and buggy was none other than Nellie Cashman. Yet when all of this was said and done, her passion was still prospecting in the hills around Tombstone, which she did in her spare time. She also would grub stake into other miners' claims, so that if they struck it rich, she would also receive income from their mine. Grub staking was investing money in another miner's search, kind of investing in hopes that they would strike it rich. In Tombstone, Nellie's life was not easy either. While there, Nellie's sister and brother-in-law both died of tuberculosis, leaving 5 children for Nellie to care for. Nellie did take care of them in Tombstone, and all turned out to be successful individuals in their fields of endeavor. Nellie remained in Tombstone for 6 years, and after 6 years, Nellie sold her businesses, and with her 5 nieces and nephews in tow, she headed further west and north, still in pursuit of that gold strike. When the children were somewhat older, she left the children in some Catholic boarding schools, knowing that the rough-and-tumble mining camps were not the ideal setting to raise children. As an aside, Nellie did strike it rich later in life in Alaska. But she did stay in touch with the children, helping them until her death from pneumonia. Nellie died in the winter of 1923, January 4th, in Victoria, British Columbia. She is buried there in Ross Bay Cemetery. Now, I want to close today by coming back to the issue of a church raising money from prostitution and gambling. I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, how can a church possibly preach against these vices when they are the source of a majority of their church budget? And to add another piece to this inquiry, prostitutes were not allowed to attend either church because the churches were on the north side of Fremont Street, a place that prostitutes were not allowed to go. I've wondered if there wasn't more these churches could do to rescue these women from prostitution, kind of like Nellie Cashman, helping them go to Tucson or helping them go to their folks, or even maybe helping create businesses in town where they could earn a good wage working in Tombstone. Now granted, many prostitutes made a lot of money as a prostitute, but how much personal integrity did they have to give up to be a prostitute? And yet, as I read several different articles and books and things, Pastor Endicott Peabody, the pastor of St. Paul's, and Nellie Cashman seemed to think nothing of the notion that they should not raise money from these sources. They didn't blink. When Mrs. Gage brought a large sum of money to Pastor Endicott, telling him that it was derived from a high-stakes poker game at their home, Pastor Endicott kind of smiled and said, "Well, the Lord's pot must be kept boiling, even if it takes the devil's kindling wood." That's an interesting statement. Similarly, Nellie Cashman, when asked if the source of donations ever bothered her, said, "Whether the money comes from an upstanding citizen or a member of the outlaw faction or a prostitute makes no difference to me. The money doesn't know the difference. What matters is what it's used for, and I see to it that in one way or another it helps humanity." So, what do you, the viewers, think on this subject? Let me close this blog by recounting a very quick story from the scriptures. It is from John 8, and it's a story of the woman brought to Jesus caught in adultery. This woman was brought by the Pharisees, and they accused her of being caught in the very act of adultery. They said Moses' law said that they should stone her, and they wondered what Jesus would say. Now, interestingly, Jesus knelt and began to write on the ground. They kept demanding an answer. Finally, he rose and said, "Okay, he who is without sin cast the first stone at her." Then he knelt down again and began to write on the ground. One by one, the accusers slinked away, leaving Jesus alone with the woman. Jesus stood again and asked the woman, "Where are your accusers? Did no one stay to condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more."
Well, that's it for today. It is a warm one here. It's 108 degrees. But that's neither here nor there with regard to the blogs. If you have any comments, you can leave them below or send them to the Arizona Revival History Channel at gmail.com. Arizona Revival History Channel at gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I have one more video blog I want to do on Tombstone. If you want to be contacted when that comes out, click subscribe down below. If you like today's video, click like. And I'm Dale Gilmore, and until next time, God bless you.